Alright, you egg-sucking piece of gutter trash. It is time to rank the X-Men movies from best to... Oh, sorry about that. I tried. In honor of the release of Deadpool and Wolverine, I thought it'd be a great idea to look back at the previous X-Men movies. The longest movie franchise in Marvel history, even surpassing the MCU. I will be going through each film, and then at the end of the video, I will be ranking them. And just to clarify things, I'll be going through the release of the film instead of chronological order. And also, I'll be including the Deadpool films, obviously, and New Mutants, which is a film you probably forgot came out. Sounds simple enough? Okay, let us begin with the first Fox Marvel movie. After the success of Blade, Marvel decided to take another crack at one of their properties. Only this time, they made a movie about the astonishing team, the X-Men. Directed by Brian Gay Singer and written by David Hayter. Yes, you heard that right. Solid Snake himself wrote this movie. And the sequel.
Kept you waiting, huh?
So the first X-Men movie was pretty groundbreaking at the time. It was very successful at the box office, even surpassing Blade. And it showed that comic book movies could be serious. And this was during a time when we had Batman and Robin. People lost faith in superhero movies after that. But boy, was there more to offer. Now, the first X-Men movie is widely considered dated for some people, and I'm gonna have to disagree. While it does have some cheesy lines like the infamous Toad getting struck by lightning line.
Do you know what happens to a toad when it's struck by lightning? The same thing that happens to everything else.
The rest of the film still holds up. The CGI still kind of holds up. I mean, we've gotten better through the years, so compare this to, like, say, something like a recent Marvel film. Actually, I think X-Men looks better than the recent Marvel films, to be honest. The action scenes are astonishing. The performances are phenomenal, especially with Hugh Jackman's Wolverine, who got criticized before the movie even came out. And understandable. I mean, Hugh Jackman's like, what, 6'4"? Wolverine's supposed to be 5'3". It didn't make sense, but when you watch the movie, especially for people who saw it the first time, nobody could replace Hugh Jackman as Wolverine. And he's still playing the character till this day. Everyone in the movie was perfectly cast. Patrick Stewart as Professor X, Ian McKellen as Magneto, fucking amazing casting. Anne Paquin as Rogue. Well, unfortunately, Rogue as a character throughout the films doesn't have her flying powers, mainly because they probably didn't have the rights to Ms. Marvel. But still, she was great casting. Famke Janssen as Jean Grey and James Marsden as Cyclops, also great. The only odd one is Halle Berry as Storm, only because she has a horrible accent, which she will later on get rid of.
At least I've chosen a side.
The whole relationship between Wolverine and Rogue is probably the heart of the film. The chemistry between the two is great. It has this, like, not really a father-daughter dynamic, but more like a older brother and young sister type of relationship. I guess the only issue I have with the film is Magneto's plan. He uses Rogue to, like, make every human into mutants, but the process doesn't work and they all die. So what really was the point, though? I thought his whole reasoning was to have mutants coexist with humans, trying to make a world a better place, just like Charles, but he has different methods. I guess not. What are you, stupid, Magneto? And yeah, he's always been depicted as a villain in the early comics, but through Claremont's run, he made him more sympathetic in a way. And this was during a time when they make villains sympathetic and actually make them good characters. But now it's gotten known they should stop doing that. So the first X-Men movie is pretty great. It's just that later films are better. X-Men 2 surpasses the first movie by a mile. The opening scene alone gives you a taste of what's to come. They topped it up a notch with the action scenes, the highlights being the Nightcrawler opening scene, as mentioned, and the Wolverine versus Deathstrike fight. The way it's choreographed, the quick edits, the way that it makes you feel the character's pains in a way. Like when Deathstrike stabs Wolverine in the back, you kind of get shivers down your spine. And with the CGI, many people have said that the first X-Men movie has dated CGI, but X2, not a single soul has mentioned how bad the CGI is, cause it's just that good. The story itself takes some inspiration from God Loves, Man Kills, where William Stryker is the main villain, and my god, he makes an intimidating villain. I mean, he controls mutants, he experiments them, he is a complete monster, and he doesn't even have any powers, and it still makes him a scary villain. You also get to see a little bit of Wolverine's backstory and how he's connected to Stryker, adding more tragedy to Wolverine. The only gripe I have with the film is that Xavier's not in the movie that much, which there's story reasons for that. But other than that, there's not really anything bad I could say about X2. It's just really good. This was peak back in the day until another comic book movie showed up. Rewatching this a few days ago, I forgot how good it was. I guess the main reason for that is because it doesn't feel like a superhero movie. They don't feel like superheroes in this movie either. It doesn't end with a giant CGI fight or anything like that. Which there's nothing wrong with that, but something about it just makes it special. I would actually consider this movie almost flawless. Unfortunately, I cannot say the same for the next movie. We are now entering the dark ages of the X-Men films, starting with The Last Stand. Now, funny enough, this is the one X-Men movie I've seen the most, mainly because this was actually the first X-Men movie I saw in theaters. I was a little kid back then, and I actually kind of enjoyed it at the time. And in some ways, there are some good things in X-Men The Last Stand that I can say are pretty good. Like, I'd be lying if I didn't say that the Xavier and Jean Grey death scenes were emotional, because we've actually been around with these characters long. So in a way, their deaths actually had a big impact on me, and probably some other people maybe. Unfortunately, I cannot say the same for Cyclops. Fucking dies off screen, mainly because James Marsden was busy doing Superman Returns. And that's another thing. Cyclops in all of these movies has been treated like shit. I'm so glad X-Men 97 fixed that. And speaking of Superman Returns, Bryan Singer went to direct that over X-Men 3. And instead we had Brett Ratner, another piece of shit. So X-Men 3, just like every other third movie in the franchise, it sucks. It has the same problems as Spider-Man 3 and every other movie with too many plots. They combine the Cure story and the Dark Phoenix saga. And you can tell that they really wanted to tell the Cure story over the Dark Phoenix storyline, because majority of the film is focused on that. But they set it up in X2, so they of course had to do it. What they should have done was make 2 more movies. One with the Cure, and then the 4th one would be the Dark Phoenix saga. But of course they had to follow that trilogy trope, because 3 movies is enough. It's not like they were going to make more after that. Oh yeah, Angel's in this movie. I forgot to mention that, because I literally forgot he was in the movie. But seriously though, X-Men 3 does have some good moments. Like I said, the deaths of Jean Grey and Professor X were pretty emotional. Kelsey Grammer's Beast, fucking perfect casting. But it's just that the Dark Phoenix saga, which is widely considered one of the best X-Men stories of all time, and they just make it into this boring, grounded version of it. But hopefully someday they will make a good Dark Phoenix movie in the future, and hopefully they don't fuck it up again for the 2nd time, right? Bitch! So now we're into X-Men Origins Wolverine, and my god, I want to kill myself. This film tries to treat it like it's a cheesy action film, but fails at every single thing that makes an action film. And of course, this movie's notorious for how they treated Deadpool. They sewed his mouth shut, they gave him long blades that come out of his arms, which is why they call him Barakapool. This movie obviously tells his origin story, how he got his adamantium body and claws, his relationship with Sabretooth, which they retcon it to be that they're brothers, which was never acknowledged in the first X-Men movie. And also have a fucking drinking game every time Wolverine says Victor. It is so annoying that I want to shove some adamantium claws in my ears. Victor! 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 Gambit is played by Taylor Kitsch, and he fucking sucks as Gambit. And I don't really blame it on Taylor Kitsch. I mainly blame it on Fox and the CEO at the time, which was Tom Rothman, who is now the CEO of Sony, by the way, and is involved with the Spider-Man films. And also, Will.i.am is in this movie. Will.i.am from freaking Black Eyed Peas. Are you fucking serious? The most fucking overrated band of all time. I praised William Stryker in X-Men 2, but in X-Men Origins, he's just another evil generic general. And also, how the fuck are these two supposed to look similar? This guy looks like he's 59 or something. And also another problem with this film is that it's not rated R. And this was during a time when superhero movies did not take that much risk with R-rated films, even though Wolverine Origins came out the same year as Watchmen, which is an R-rated comic book movie. And prior to that, we had Blade. And another thing is that this is an origin movie. What made Wolverine so interesting was that he had a memory loss. He didn't know anything about his past. We didn't know anything about his past. It was just kept as a secret. Wolverine is a mysterious character until Marvel decided to make an origin for him. And it completely ruined the mystery and what made Wolverine interesting, at least for me. The only origin that we need was how he got the adamantium claws. He's pretty much Marvel's Joker with how we don't know his origin. So X-Men Origins Wolverine, it sucks. Moving on. So then we got another X-Men prequel, only this time it's good. X-Men First Class is one of the most comic booky films of all time. It captures everything from the 60s X-Men comics. They even have the yellow suits. It tells the story of Charles Xavier and how he started the X-Men. Also how he met Eric Lyncher. And it also is a Magneto origin story. As a matter of fact, this movie is more of a Magneto film than an X-Men movie. Which is actually funny because originally they were going to make an X-Men Origins Magneto film, so they just incorporated it into this film, and it's easily the best part of the film. Now granted, the movie is great in all aspects. The performances are great from James McAvoy and Michael Fassbender. They are true successors to Patrick Stewart and Ian McKellen. This is also where we get to see Jennifer Lawrence as Mystique for the first time, a time where she was dedicated to wear the makeup. And also I would like to mention Kevin Bacon's performance as Sebastian Shaw. A very underrated performance, perhaps. He just nails it so well with his charisma while also being intimidating. This film was directed by Matthew Vaughn, who also directed Kick-Ass and Kingsman, which is no surprise because he makes such great movies. The only gripes I have with the film is really the Hellfire Club's plan. All they want is war and they want to wreak chaos. And that's it. They just want war. They just want the world to burn. Gee, that sounds great. But overall, this film is freaking amazing. It is one of the best comic book films of all time. And it's probably the closest to being accurate to the comics as well. Michael Fassbender steals the show. And Magneto's pretty much the heart of the film with everything he went through. You also get why he wants revenge on this guy. It is pretty much his movie. And I also forgot to mention the music.
Nice.
The Wolverine is yet another Wolverine film, if you couldn't tell. And he goes on a journey to Japan. This film, surprisingly, is very divisive, or actually hated. And I actually don't understand why. The Wolverine, to me, I actually really enjoy. I really think the first two acts are really good. The only reason why people hate it is mainly because of the third act, where he fights a giant robot samurai, who is supposed to be the Silver Samurai, by the way. And I agree that it ruined Silver Samurai. Just make him a generic robot, really? But I do think the first two acts are pretty good. It takes place after X-Men 3, where Wolverine is still grieving over the death of Jean Grey, having to kill her. He's on his own, he's very depressed, but then gets encountered by a Japanese mutant named Yukio, and she takes him to Japan. And all the stuff where Wolverine fights ninjas, the Yakuza, is actually pretty entertaining. It takes inspiration from the Claremont run, where Wolverine goes to Japan, and it's actually a very memorable story because Japan is like a very peaceful place for Wolverine. It's where he's at peace with himself and he has a family and kids. He's very happy when he's in Japan. And that is like an important factor to the character, is his time in Japan. And I think it does a really good job with that. But the other gripe I have aside from this third act is that it's not rated R. Just like X-Men Origins, the Wolverine plays it safe. Although it is a little bit brutal than X-Men Origins. But really, like, Wolverine is a very violent character. Like, he has freaking claws, man. He chops off limbs. He can chop off anything. So having it not be rated R, it's weird. And he has a very tragic story that is definitely not PG-13. But overall, the Wolverine is actually, to me, pretty underrated. And I think it's getting overshadowed over the third act because that's really what people mainly talk about. But I think people should give the Wolverine a chance. Yeah, it's not perfect, but it's very enjoyable. Definitely better than some comic book films that are far worse. I do think they should have taken inspiration from Kurosawa or something. Since, it takes place in Japan and there's a bunch of samurais and Silver Samurai's the main villain. I feel like that could have made the movie better. X-Men Days of Future Past is pretty much the endgame of the X-Men films. It brings together the OG cast and also the first class cast and does a really good job blending them together. The highlights of this film is actually James McAvoy, Professor X, where he's dealing with alcoholism. He's dealing with depression because he lost all of his students. And it shows a different side of Xavier that we haven't seen before. The film does a great job at making you feel like everything is at stake. You don't know if they will succeed or not. It's one of those types of films that does a great job with that. And it's very rare. And with the Sentinels, aside from them having terrible designs, in my opinion, I do think they were very threatening. They looked like they were unstoppable. And yes, I cannot forget the Quicksilver scene. I don't need to say much about it. Everyone has said their thoughts on it, and I agree. X-Men Days of Future Past was pretty much a reboot of the franchise. After the failures of Last Stand and Origins, the franchise was at a low at the time. Days of Future Past picks it up again. Bryan Singer came back, and the composer of X2 also comes back, and the theme song plays. Dun, da, 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 da. And when that played, oh my god, it felt like the X-Men were back, baby. Oh, for fuck's sake. Now, to be honest, X-Men Apocalypse is not the worst thing I've ever seen. There are some good moments in it. Wolverine scene, for example. And yes, the Quicksilver scene I think is even better than the one from Days of Future Past. But my gripes of the film is mainly Apocalypse himself. What the fuck have they done with him? He's so tiny compared to everyone else. He doesn't even grow into giant size like he usually does in the comics. All he does is monologue and monologue and monologue. This world needs to be cleansed. Everything they built will fall. Bullshit like that. And another gripe I have is Jennifer Lawrence herself. She is pretty much one of the main focuses of the movie. And my god, she is annoying as fuck. And also, she's not even in the blue makeup either that much. Mainly because she got sick of doing it. So much for Mutant and Proud. And this film, well, it's not terrible. It just feels bland. It just feels like another generic superhero story that doesn't do anything new. Oh, and look at that. They're setting up Dark Phoenix Saga again. I sure hope they don't fuck it up a second time. Right? So after his horrendous debut in X-Men Origins, a Deadpool film has finally been made years later after leaks of test footage showed up. And with that leaking, it convinced Fox to make a Deadpool film with Tim Miller as the director, Ryan Reynolds returning, and the film turned out to be great. Deadpool completely captures the character really well. Ryan Reynolds absolutely kills it as the character. He's pretty much just like Hugh Jackman. No one can ever replace Ryan Reynolds because he's just that good. Action scenes are pretty good, especially the CGI, which looks really well considering the budget is very low. The comedy, which is the main factor, is done really well. Every joke lands. There's not a single one where I was cringed at. It's not like the MCU where they just make stupid, goofy humor that's terrible and out of place. Everything in Deadpool is done really well. It's almost flawless. And they even got Colossus right this time. Finally speaks Russian. And another thing why this movie is so great is because it's rated R. It's all bloody and gory. Too many fucks and shits. It's fucking awesome. Logan, man, what is there to say about this movie? Ever since the first trailer released, I was already hooked. The way that they used Johnny Cash's Hurt just blends in really well with the tone of the film. And also, it was Hugh Jackman's last film until he comes back for Deadpool and Wolverine. And right there, I was getting emotional just by the trailer itself. And then when the movie came out, man, it just broke me into tears. And I don't usually cry that much. Logan is pretty much takes inspiration from Old Man Logan loosely, and it follows him having to take care of Charles Xavier, who is very different than he usually is. And the performance by Patrick Stewart is perfect. We get to see a different side of Charles Xavier, something we've never seen before. Very sad as well. We also get the introduction to X-23, played perfectly by Daphne Keane. She's just like a mini weapon. And the bad guys of the film, which are the Reavers, were actually pretty cool. Like, they were actually pretty intimidating. And yes, finally, after 2 Wolverine films, we finally got an R-rated Wolverine movie. We get to see the berserker rage, all the limbs cut off, all the stabs in the head. It is fucking beautiful. And this movie was a perfect send-off to Hugh Jackman's Wolverine. Until Deadpool and Wolverine, of course, comes out. Deadpool 2 is not as good as the first one. Heck, I don't even think it's that great. Well, actually, it's not that bad. It's just that first movie was so great that I doubted that they were going to top it. I mean, you got Cable showing up for the first time, played very well by Josh Brolin. You got the X-Force, although it's pretty much a gag. And the Juggernaut shows up, and he actually looks like the Juggernaut. Bitch! My main gripes of the film is actually the villain, which is the stupid fat kid. Can't even remember his name. He's just an annoying little shit. But really, this movie is pretty much a parody of Logan. Where Deadpool is very depressed because he lost the love of his life. He has to take care of this kid, although he fucks that up. And he dies for a little while, and it plays the Logan music in the background. So all of that is pretty much Logan. And honestly, it's a pretty good parody. But as a Deadpool film, it just, to me, some of the jokes did not land compared to the first one. But there were definitely some that made me laugh so hard. So overall, Deadpool 2 is just a mediocre film. Let's just hope that Deadpool and Wolverine is great. I can't believe it. I can't believe that they fucked up the Dark Phoenix saga for the second time. How hard is it to make the Dark Phoenix saga? Well, actually, it kind of is hard to do it if you are making it into one movie. Honestly, the Dark Phoenix saga should have been 2 parts. So that way you can explore everything that happens through the story. Bring in characters like the Shi'ar Empire, who are big factor to the Dark Phoenix saga. Instead, they bring in these shape-shifting aliens who apparently are not the Skrulls, even though they're pretty much like the Skrulls. And Fox has the rights to the Skrulls because they own the Fantastic Four. But even then, the Skrulls have nothing to do with the Dark Phoenix storyline. At least with this one, compared to The Last Stand, they do go to space. But that's only in the beginning. The entire story takes place in space where there's aliens. But the whole entire movie takes place on Earth. What is this obsession of making it grounded? Making it a street level type story? That's not what it should be. And plus, the movie itself is so fucking boring. I watched this in theaters and I almost fell asleep. And then I rewatched it again a few days ago, and nothing has changed. I literally looked at my phone almost all throughout the film because it was just boring. And even the actors looked like they were bored. They looked like they were done with this franchise. Jennifer Lawrence for sure was done with the franchise. And everything looks so cheap. This movie got delayed so many times, and they still managed to make the CGI look like shit. Freaking X-Men 1 looks better than this. Fox has done the inevitable to fuck up a beloved story twice now. Fuck this movie. This was the send-off to the X-Men universe, a franchise that has been around since the 2000s. This is how it ends. Fuck this. New Mutants. I'm going to be very quick with this one because I literally forgot what happened in the film. And I watched it a few days ago. I never watched it in theaters because I just didn't feel like watching it. And for good reason. This movie is just boring. And I'll give it credit for it trying to do something different. They tried to make it a horror film and it completely fails on that. It's not even scary. The jump scares were predictable. The creatures themselves, to be honest, I didn't find them scary. Nothing in this film is scary. The characters are unlikable, every single one of them. Magic, well, that's part of her character. Maybe might be the only good thing about the film. And perfectly cast. I mean, it's Anya Taylor-Joy. Perfect casting. Too bad it was a waste. So New Mutants, fucking forgettable. This movie has been delayed multiple times as well. And it still managed to be terrible with all that time they had. So those are all the X-Men films. Man, that was a long journey down memory lane. So many good ones, but there are also some bad ones. And now, let's begin with the ranking, starting with the bottom. Number 13, no surprise, it's going to be Dark Ass. Completely boring, completely ruins everything. Fuck this movie. Then we get to number 12, which is New Mutants. Very forgettable. Number 11 goes to X-Men Origins Wolverine, a cheesy action film that completely fails on all the cheese. Number 10 goes to The Last Stand, probably the best Dark Phoenix movie we're ever gonna get. Number 9 goes to Apocalypse, which actually is not terrible, but it's the best of the worst. Number 8 goes to Deadpool 2, which to me, like I said, is mediocre. Number 7 goes to The Wolverine, very underrated. Number 6 goes to X-Men 1, also a very underrated film. Number 5 is pretty hard. I had to flip a coin for this. Days of Future Past brought back the X-Men to its glory. Number 4 goes to First Class, which actually was the film that brought the X-Men back to its glory. Number 3 is going to go to Deadpool, a great comedy that respects the character. Number 2 is going to go to X2, X-Men United, one of the best comic book films of all time that still holds up till this day. And number 1, no surprise, it's Logan. Logan is a freaking masterpiece and a perfect send-off, a real send-off to the X-Men franchise. So that's the list. I've went through all the X-Men films. What is your ranking? Comment below and tell me what your rankings of the X-Men films are. Like and subscribe. And as always, let's hug it out. Bitch!